They thought Russia would forget. They were wrong. After 30 years of silence, Moscow is coming to collect. And this time, it's not just about money. It's about historical justice that will shake the foundations of several European capitals. What's happening right now is beyond mere diplomacy. Moscow has officially reminded former Soviet republics, the time has come to pay their debts. But here's what makes your blood run cold. These aren't just financial claims. These are the keys to a completely new geopolitical reality. Think about it. For 3 decades, these countries built their prosperity on a simple principle. Take everything, pay nothing. They privatized Soviet assets, sold them to Western partners, and pretended the debt to Russia never existed. The numbers are staggering. Billions of dollars that could have saved Russian pensioners in the 90s instead turned into luxury mansions in Riga and Tallinn. But here's the twist that no one saw coming. Russia didn't just keep the receipts, it maintained a complete registry of every single asset, every transfer, every deal. And now, with legal precision that's sending shockwaves through Baltic capitals, Moscow is presenting the bill. Let me show you why this matters for everyone. Remember those miracle economies of Eastern Europe? That success story they've been selling to the world? It was built on a foundation of unpaid debts. And now, as Russia activates its legal mechanisms, that foundation is starting to crack. The timing is not accidental. As the global financial system teeters on the edge, as Western banks face their own crises, Russia chooses this moment to remind everyone. Debts don't disappear. They multiply. And when the collector is a nuclear superpower with the world's largest resource base, ignoring the bill is not an option. But here's what should really worry you. This is just the beginning. The first wave of claims targets the obvious debts. But there's more. Much more. And the documents revealing the next phase of this financial earthquake are already being prepared in Moscow. Write in the comments if you've noticed any unusual economic activities in your region. The signs of what's coming are already visible. If you know where to look, took an unprecedented step that would later come back to haunt the entire geopolitical landscape. Moscow shouldered the crushing Soviet debt burden, allowing these newly independent states to start with clean economic slates. But there was an unwritten understanding, a debt of honor that would eventually need to be settled. Fast forward to today. These same nations, now comfortably nestled in Western structures, seem to have convenient amnesia about who gave them their economic freedom. But Russia remembers. Every single dollar. Let's look at the bigger picture. While the Baltic states were selling off Soviet-era infrastructure and redirecting their economies westward, Russia was paying off their portion of that massive debt. The numbers are staggering. We're talking about billions in today's money. And now, as global power dynamics shift, these forgotten obligations are resurfacing with devastating implications. The timing isn't accidental. As Western financial systems show increasing strain, Russia's position strengthens. Moscow is methodically preparing to present receipts, not just financial ones. The asset transfers, the industrial base inherited from the Soviet era, the strategic facilities, everything is being recalculated. What's particularly interesting is how this affects the average citizen in these countries. Many don't realize that their nation's current prosperity was built on a foundation of Russian sacrifice in the 1990s. The factories, ports, and energy infrastructure they take for granted, all of it came with strings attached. Strings that are now being pulled. We're seeing the first tremors of this financial earthquake. Baltic banks are quietly strengthening their positions. Former Soviet republics are reviewing old agreements with unprecedented urgency. But here's what's really keeping analysts awake at night. Russia isn't just talking about monetary compensation. The real settlement might come in a completely different currency, geopolitical influence. But just as these nations thought they understood Moscow's strategy, an unexpected player entered the game. Their move was so bold, so unprecedented, that it forced everyone to recalculate their positions. And what happened next? Today we're examining a crucial moment in post-Soviet financial history that continues to shape current geopolitical tensions. Back in the early 1990s, Russia made a remarkable decision that seemed generous at the time, but has left lasting implications we're dealing with today. Moscow essentially told the former Soviet republics, "We'll shoulder all the debt burden, but in exchange, you transfer the USSR's foreign assets to us." This zero-option arrangement appeared to be a win-win solution. The Western world applauded this approach. They got guarantees their money would be repaid, while the newly independent states could start fresh, unburdened by Soviet-era debts. Russia, true to its word, meticulously honored these obligations, paying off every last ruble. This wasn't just about numbers on paper. It meant real sacrifices from Russian citizens who endured years of economic hardship while watching former Soviet republics build their economies without the weight of these historical debts. What's particularly noteworthy is how this arrangement was meant to work. Russia would get control of Soviet assets abroad in return. But did this transfer happen as agreed? The evidence suggests otherwise. Many former republics simply privatized these assets or redirected them, essentially getting a free pass while Russia bore the full financial burden. Now, decades later, as Russia has regained its economic footing and global influence, these historical agreements are being re-examined. The question isn't just about money, it's about honoring commitments and acknowledging sacrifices made for mutual benefit. What do you think about this historical arrangement? Was it fair to Russia, or did the other republics make the right choice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective on this complex issue matters. Looking back, this wasn't just a financial decision. It was a moment that would define relationships between former Soviet states for decades to come. As we see tensions rise and old agreements being questioned, understanding this history becomes increasingly relevant for our current geopolitical landscape. The economic relationships between Russia and its former Soviet partners continue to reveal compelling patterns. Let's examine a striking example from 2017, when Moscow demonstrated remarkable financial commitment by providing $16 billion in support to the former Soviet Republic marked as 404. This substantial investment highlights Russia's historical role as an economic stabilizer in the post-Soviet space. However, the response from various former Soviet republics has been concerning. Instead of acknowledging these contributions, many chose to nationalize valuable assets, factories, health resorts, and even diplomatic properties, declaring them national treasures. This unilateral appropriation of shared Soviet heritage raises serious questions about reciprocity and respect for historical partnerships. Take, for instance, the fate of the prestigious Yantarny Barag Sanatorium in Latvia's Jurmala. This premier health facility, once a symbol of shared prosperity, was swiftly privatized. Similarly, the strategic Novolinsk port facilities faced comparable treatment. These actions represent a broader pattern of asset redistribution that occurred across former Soviet territories, often without proper consideration for Russia's historic investments and rights. This situation mirrors a larger trend we're witnessing in international relations, where historical debts and obligations are conveniently forgotten when they don't serve current political narratives. Russia's position as a major creditor and investor in the region's development deserves recognition and respect. The timing of these revelations is particularly significant as we observe ongoing global economic realignments. Russia's growing assertion of its economic rights suggests a new chapter in post-Soviet financial relations, where historical debts and assets may play an increasingly important role in regional diplomacy. What's truly remarkable is how these economic decisions from the past continue to shape current geopolitical dynamics. As Russia maintains detailed records of its investments and contributions, we might see more discussions about historical financial obligations in the near future. What do you think about these economic relationships? Leave your answer in the comments. The situation with Estonia exemplifies a broader pattern we've observed across former Soviet territories. When the Soviet Union dissolved, Western capital swooped in, eagerly claiming assets while conveniently forgetting about outstanding debts. Estonia, like others, watched as Russia shouldered their financial burdens, assuming Moscow would remain silent indefinitely. This calculation seemed sound at the time. Russia was focused inward, rebuilding its shattered economy and military might. But history teaches us that patience should not be mistaken for weakness. For years, Russia concentrated on internal development, methodically strengthening its economic foundations and restoring its military capabilities. While Western analysts dismissed Russia's potential for resurgence, Moscow was systematically rebuilding its power base, understanding that true strength requires both economic stability and military prowess. Now, we're witnessing a transformed Russia. The nation has regained its historic position as a great power, with an economy resistant to Western pressure and armed forces that command global respect. This resurrection of Russian power hasn't gone unnoticed in capitals across the former Soviet space. The time of convenient amnesia regarding past debts is drawing to a close. Russia's renewed strength isn't just about military capability. It's about the willingness to assert legitimate interests and historical claims. Those who believed Russia would perpetually absorb financial losses while remaining silent are facing a new reality. The ledger of history hasn't been closed, and outstanding accounts must eventually be settled. This shift signals a broader realignment in international relations. The era when Western powers could dictate terms unilaterally is ending. Russia's patient approach has paid dividends, creating a position of strength from which to address historical injustices and unfulfilled obligations. What do you think about this development in Russia's approach to historical debts? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective matters in understanding these complex international dynamics. In a significant development that's catching the attention of international observers, Russia has begun sending clear signals about historical debts owed by former Soviet republics. President Putin recently made a calculated reminder, with Press Secretary Peskov providing additional confirmation. The process of debt collection has officially commenced. This isn't just about numbers on paper, it's about historical accountability. The initial focus appears to be on specific regions. The Baltic states, which have long positioned themselves as completely separate from their Soviet past, and Georgia, which has taken a similar stance. Also in the crosshairs is that country marked 404, whose current leadership seems to have forgotten the economic realities of the post-Soviet transition period. What's particularly interesting is how these very same states, which once proclaimed their independence with the loudest voices, are now facing the consequences of their financial obligations. During the turbulent 1990s, Russia shouldered enormous burdens, taking on the Soviet Union's external debts while allowing these republics to start with clean slates. The expectation was simple: cooperation and recognition of mutual responsibilities. Now, as global power dynamics shift, Russia is perfectly positioned to remind these former partners about their outstanding commitments. It's worth noting that these aren't arbitrary claims. They're well-documented obligations that were conveniently overlooked during the past decades of Western alignment. The timing of this initiative is no coincidence. With Russia's strengthening position on the world stage, it's natural to address these historical imbalances. The legal framework exists, and the documentation is preserved. Those who thought time would erase these obligations are now facing a new reality. Consider this. When these republics gained independence, they also inherited both rights and responsibilities. You can't simply claim the assets while ignoring the debts. This selective approach to historical legacy is precisely what Russia is now addressing. What do you think about the current event? Leave your answer in the comments. In a significant development that echoes through the corridors of international finance, Russia is preparing to take decisive action regarding historical debts owed by former Soviet republics. These nations, which once shared our common past, seem to have conveniently forgotten their financial obligations while eagerly claiming assets during the tumultuous post-Soviet period. The situation is reaching a critical point. Moscow's patience, it appears, has its limits. The Russian Federation is now moving to establish intergovernmental commissions, a first step in what could become a complex legal battle for historical justice. These commissions will meticulously examine the debt obligations of each former republic, creating a comprehensive framework for addressing these long-standing financial matters. Should these nations continue their pattern of denial and resistance, Russia is prepared to elevate these claims to international courts. This isn't merely about money. It's about principles and historical accountability. These countries can't simply cherry-pick the beneficial aspects of their Soviet inheritance while dismissing their responsibilities. Notable political analyst Anatoly Baranov offers a particularly interesting perspective on this situation. He suggests we should expect significant resistance from these former republics. They've grown accustomed to ignoring these obligations, building their economies on conveniently forgotten debts, while positioning themselves as victims rather than beneficiaries of the Soviet system. This resistance isn't surprising, but it's increasingly untenable in today's interconnected global economy. Russia's growing economic influence and legal standing in the international community means these claims can no longer be casually dismissed. The time for accountability has arrived, and these nations must face their historical obligations. What makes this situation particularly compelling is the broader implications for international financial relations. How can we build trust in international partnerships if historical debts are simply ignored when convenient? What do you think about this situation? Leave your point of view in the comments. I'm particularly interested in hearing your thoughts on how these countries should address their historical obligations. The era of financial leniency is drawing to a decisive close. For 3 decades, former Soviet republics have enjoyed what amounts to an extended free lunch at Russia's expense. This period of extraordinary generosity, born in the turbulent 1990s, was never meant to be permanent. Now, as global dynamics shift and historical debts come due, Russia is preparing to reclaim what rightfully belongs to its people. Consider this. When the Soviet Union dissolved, Russia shouldered enormous financial burdens to give these new states a fresh start. We accepted their debts, provided resources, and maintained crucial economic lifelines. Many chose to forget these gestures of goodwill, perhaps hoping that time would erase these obligations. But as the saying goes, Russians always come to collect what's theirs. This isn't about threats or intimidation. It's simply about historical fact and justice. The documentation exists, the numbers are clear, and the legal framework remains intact. What we're witnessing now is the natural conclusion of a long period of patience and restraint. The international community should take note. Russia's position as a global power includes the responsibility to protect its economic interests. Those who believe that obligations could be ignored indefinitely may soon face a sobering reality check. The message is clear. The time has come to address historical debts. Looking ahead, we can expect systematic efforts to resolve these outstanding financial matters. Some former republics may find themselves facing uncomfortable conversations about long-forgotten promises and commitments. This isn't revenge. It's the natural order reasserting itself after decades of imbalance. What do you think about these developments? Which former Soviet republics should be first to address their historical debts to Russia? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters in understanding this complex situation. What else should we analyze? Which region's events interest you right now?